Okay, as promised, we're going to have our Browns Digest draft preview. Not quite a roundtable as we were supposed to be, but we're at a triangle at this point, which is fine. We'll get through it. With me today, two guys who have worked for Browns Digest. I've got Matt Wilson, who's a former center who really likes skill players, which was an immediate red flag for me. And I've also got Noah Weiskopf, who's been doing a lot of sort of reporting and other things, and he's built like a skilled player. So we're covered on multiple fronts. Look, the Browns don't pick till 74. Just casually listening to the radio as I was driving home the other day. Their tease for it was covering the radio that they were going to cover the first round, filled in a blank audio, and then said they were done with the draft, which is kind of where a lot of people are at for the most part. It's kind of what happens when you don't pick till round 3. Nevertheless, there's a lot going on. So let's start this thing up. What do we think in general about this draft class in terms of talent, and then sort of how does this draft class, suit what the Browns need? And Matt, I'll start with you.
Honestly, I don't find it to be the best draft class compared to recent years. I find that there's only a few position groups that are really up to par, and that's probably tight end, maybe defensive end, and some of the wide receivers even. But I guess if you think about some of the needs that Cleveland has right now, you're trying to prepare for life after Nick Chubb, possibly, I guess, most likely.
They have to be thinking about it. It has to be in their mind that
Definitely.
they can't just go, now we're good.
No, definitely not. Yeah, and I mean this class is, this draft class is pretty good in terms of what I think the Browns are looking for, more of like a all-purpose pass catching back. Although the team did come out and say that Jerome Ford, they're pretty confident in what Jerome Ford brings in terms of that. I still believe that they need to add somebody that can be probably more of a weapon out of the backfield, specifically as a pass catcher.
Yeah, I think the running back class is strong. I think it's got something for everybody, which I think is really interesting because we're going to see sort of how the Browns, play that. Jerome Ford had 8 carries last year. I don't know what you really take away from that. And that was with Kareem Hunt, who was bad so I feel like if Jerome Ford was good enough, he would have seen the field more. It doesn't mean he's not a good player. It just means I'm not going to bank on Jerome Ford, even though I like his skill set. Nick, what do you think? Draft class overall and sort of how it sort of matches up with what you think the Browns are going to be looking for.
Yeah, I think that this class fits what the Browns have. They don't have a pick till 74. I think that after the first handful of guys that are going to come off the board in the first round, a lot of those players between the end of the first round, second round, and maybe even a dip into the third round, a lot of teams have them rated very similar. I don't think there's a huge gap from the very top of the class and then to like I said, the end of the first, second, maybe even dip into the third. So what the Browns have, they'll still be able to get a solid player if they stay at 74. I don't necessarily think they'll be inclined to trade up for anyone unless someone they've highlighted falls into the third round, beginning of the third round, maybe end of the second. Then maybe we'll see a move up, but I doubt it. But I think that this class specifically, the Browns are in good shape to still draft for the best available player at 74.
Yeah, I agree. I think they're far more inclined to trade down or trade out in this class. I don't think it's a very good draft class. That doesn't mean there aren't good players. There's always players you can find that are going to be successful. But to your point, I think not having 42nd pick makes things a lot easier in certain respects. There were pass rushers I liked that were at that could have been available at that spot. But I think the talent that would have been available at 42 versus 74 is relatively comparable. And I think the Browns thought that was the case as well. And it always seemed dubious to me that people were like, the Browns were going to take a wide receiver at 42. And it felt like the wide receivers at 74 were going to be the same players. It's just a question of maybe you didn't get your first choice, but were you really losing that much? So I think that part is interesting. Now, if somebody wants to simulate a heart condition, as happened in the past, then I think there is some chance. I mean, if they love a guy and he's in striking distance, they'll go up and get him. Andrew Berry has shown that in the past. He did that with JOK, even though Sashi Brown was the dude at that point in the chair. Technically, he was part of the group that went up and got David Njoku, for example. So I think I wouldn't expect them to, jump into the second round, for example. But if there's a move to make, I think they could make that move. So we already sort of teased running back, and I'm curious. This is where I think things get really interesting, because I think if the Browns wanted to, whether it's at 74 or 220, whatever they are in the 7th round, you can get a downhill running back, or you can get somebody who's going to be sort of an asset in the passing game. There are a couple of guys I think that you can make the argument that maybe they can do a little bit of both. But the question is, keeping in mind that Jerome Ford is the one back this team has added since Deshaun Watson, or in the draft anyway, that was added since Deshaun Watson was on the team. So he's the only guy where they said, we have Deshaun Watson, Jerome Ford, we feel like he fits. So with that in mind, Noah, who do you like running back wise for the Browns that could, whether it's a pass catching guy, or you like the idea of, hey, if they're going to spread out the offense, and this is more where I tend to flow, I'll take a big back and have him run against puny little nickel backers and just gouge them for massive amounts of yards.
Yeah, I don't even have one specific for you, but I would say that there's so many guys, especially from smaller schools. I can't remember his name now, but he's from a smaller school. But like a guy like that, just take a flyer on late. There's so many good running backs in this class. And even at the very top, like Bijan Robinson and Jahmyr Gibbs, those guys are going to come off early. So there's going to be a ton of guys after that you can get later on in the draft, whether that's a downhill running back, like you said, or a receiving threat. So I think that they have so many different options. They could take one early, they could take one in the middle of the round in 4 or 5, or they can wait until 6 or 7. So there's so many different avenues they could go. They have so many different picks. So they pretty much will have their choice of whichever guy they like. They'll be able to get him wherever they are.
Yeah, look, the Browns, in sort of how they draft, they'll take smaller school guys, but they have a track record with doing it. And it's interesting. Either guys transferred from big schools, or they're small school guys who played against big school competition. The easiest example is Alex Wright. He played for UAB, and they played Georgia last year. So the Browns got to see sort of what does Alex Wright look like against, the best in the nation type thing. And obviously they felt good enough about him to take him where they did. So like, to me, the two backs that stand out, which I think are really tantalizing for the Browns because they played against the best schedules in the country, and they also represent sort of the two opposite ends of the spectrum, sort of, to me, are Devin Achane from Texas A&M. He is the prototypical spread back. He's very fast. He's going to thrive if you spread things out, and he can be a pass catcher, and he's a sprinter and all that. The other option is Cartavius Tank Bigsby, who is a power back. Auburn's offense was horrible, just unwatchably bad at points. I mean, I give them credit the way they come up with creative ways to try to move their formations around and use motions and stuff to confuse them. But everybody knew from the start of the game, Tank's getting the ball, we've got to stop him, and they couldn't do it. And he's got a number of ways to beat you in terms of he can win with speed, he can win with power and agility. He just does a lot of those things, and he's not bad with the ball and catching passes out of the backfield, even though his team leading 30 receptions was fueled by a bunch of toss sweeps, which is just a testament to how bad they are offensively. Matt, do you have a preference or an inkling? Like, where would you go versus where do you think where the Browns would go with that type of style?
So recently I've had kind of a revelation. I like Keaton Mitchell out of ECU.
Yes,
he's insane speed, almost as
built like Noah.
Yes. And but recently I've been scouting a lot of Roschon Johnson. I'm actually afraid he's going to be creeping up boards a little too high from where the Browns might actually take him. But he's not the fastest guy in the world, but he runs with so much power. It's insane. He's an excellent pass blocker, catches the ball in the backfield well for being a former quarterback, but he displays a lot of the things that, you know, a great NFL running back should.
He didn't get a lot of touches by virtue of the fact that Bijan Robinson's in the same backfield. But when he did get the ball, he's going to run through you. Well, what makes him interesting is the fact that he is a former quarterback. He's really smart, and it's apparent because if you watch Texas's offense, they move him all over the place. And you can do some fun things with him, like, you know, you can slide motion him, and then suddenly he's under center, and that's your Brissett move now is Roschon Johnson at 220, taking the snap under center and driving forward. He has lined up wide. He can do some of those things. He can catch the ball reasonably well.
Yeah,
and that's sort of where, like, it's interesting because if you I tend to, having watched a lot of Cal. And because of Bill Musgrave, that's sort of where I feel like this offense is going to go. They really like the Chip Kelly influence. Kevin Stefanski has mentioned it by name, but there's a part of you that goes, well, how deep do they want to go into the RPO game? And do they want to get into pistol? And if they want to get in the pistol, do they want a true dive back? Roschon Johnson could be an excellent guy that is just the dive guy because he's quick. And the Browns tried this with Kareem Hunt last year, and Kareem Hunt was too damn slow. And this created a huge problem. Now, Nick Chubb could theoretically do that too, but you're probably always going to want him to be your deep back. Gives you some more options. So that part of it is interesting. So, yeah, does it hurt Roschon Johnson that he doesn't have a lot of touches for a team like the Browns? Maybe. It's hard to gauge on that. He's really a wild card in this draft. And to your point, people keep moving him up. I don't know how much stock I put into that because, like I said, you can only go on what you see to a certain point. How much projection do you want to get into where you're suddenly going, I'll use a day 2 pick on a guy who didn't play all that much? It's tough. So I like him. I'm interested, but to me personally, I don't think I could pull the trigger on him before day 3. And if somebody wants to take him on day 2, you know, more power to him. I'll be interested to see what they do. But ultimately, I sort of, it's tough. I see a lot of that angle of it. To me, I think Nick Chubb's going to crush it this year by virtue of the fact that if they are good spreading the ball out and Nick Chubb is suddenly going against 215-pound linebackers who are trying to be multifaceted, trying to worry about the passing game and the running game, he's just going to run over and through them. The one guy who jumps out to me, if you just look at it from that angle, is Abakanda from Pitt. He's 20 years old. He's very fast. He tested really well. I really don't care about that. He's got one of the most disciplined running styles in the class for being so young. He doesn't go anywhere but north and south. Like if you watch, all of his touchdowns are between the hashes. So, and that's partly because Pitt's offense was always condensed. So he didn't really have anywhere to go. He just goes straight forward. And if you do that, and he's obviously got speed in the open field. If the Browns are able to spread teams out and do that, and he's just a disciplined runner who's going to take exactly what it's given to him, he's going to be a problem. He's also very young and productive and all those things. There's a lot of things that would attract the Browns. Even if Andrew Berry wants to lie to me and say that age doesn't matter, I can look at his draft record and go, age is very important to you. So that part is interesting. So yeah, I'm very curious to see that. But like, that's the thing. You watch guys like Jahmyr Gibbs or Keaton Mitchell or Devin Achane, you're like, those guys are a lot of fun. Are they, obviously I don't see a world where Gibbs, short of robbing a liquor store during the draft on live camera, is going to be in a way to get to the Browns. But does that style be an attractive one for what the Browns want to do? Maybe, but we'll see. And personally, I'm a big proponent of the Browns taking 2 running backs, whether that's drafting 2 or drafting 1 and getting an undrafted free agent. There's a couple guys that I don't think are going to get drafted that I think are going to be interesting. To me, one that I'll mention is Kalen LeBourne from Marshall. Started his career at Florida State. I don't know if it's a grades issue or whatever, but he disappeared for a while, was in JUCO, and then played this last year at Marshall. And if you watch him just against Notre Dame, one, he's a very angry young man with how he runs, and two, they didn't want to tackle him anymore. And ultimately, he was the leading rusher in the Sun Belt, and a big reason why Marshall was able to upset Notre Dame in that game. So if you're getting him, he's 24, which is one of the reasons he's probably not going to get drafted. If you're able to get him on a flyer, I think he's a guy that's sort of interesting to you.
Definitely.
Moving on. Look, obviously the Browns lose Michael Woods the second with the Achilles injury. For whatever reason, it feels more real to me with that injury that the Browns are going to be looking at wide receiver help, and it probably didn't change it all. But, with that, they finally found Marquise Goodwin after 3 weeks, so he's on the board. Do the Browns need to continue to add wide receiver help? And if so, who do we like? Noah, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I think that it's important to have. You can never have too many receivers. Is the bottom line. They're going to get Jakeem Grant back. They're going to try to implement him into their offense as well. So that's another name.
Big shout out from Andrew Berry at the presser.
Yeah. So that, and then also they have Elijah Moore coming in. So they have depth there. But you can never, like I said, you can never have enough. So I think that a couple of guys, depending on where these guys fall, like a Parker Washington, I don't know exactly where he is going to be drafted. Again, like this wide receiver class is really cloudy. Nobody really knows where some of these guys are going to go. And there's a big range. I know a guy like Josh Downs is a really talented player. Tank Dell from Houston as well. I know Hyatt was in for a top 30, but I think that he's probably going to be off the board.
I feel like ownership just wanted to hang out, but you never know.
So, I mean, but that could be, again, like if he starts falling a little bit, is that a guy that they could trade up for? So I don't really know. Yeah. So those are a couple of guys that I've kept an eye on throughout this pre-draft process.
Yeah. Parker Washington, I think Kevin Stefanski has an itch he'd like to scratch back when he had Cordero Patterson, when the Vikings had Cordero Patterson, that big bodied, basically a running back body who plays wide receiver. Parker Washington certainly would do that. So he's interesting, obviously still very raw, but he's a large man, young, didn't have a ton of production. So it's a little bit of projection, but he's interesting. Whereas a lot of these guys are very straightforward. You know what Jalen Hyatt is before he walks in the door, and some of these other receivers. Matt, what do you think?
No, I totally agree. Especially about Parker Washington. But I love Marvin Mims. I have for a while now. He's
analytics darling.
Yes, definitely. So I'm not going to talk much about him, just simply because I feel like everyone should know about him already, because he's been in numerous conversations recently.
Well, here's my question with Mims.
Mm-hmm.
The analytics are all over him. He crushed his workouts and everything else. Why isn't he? What stops him from being at top of the second round conversation or being just a solid second rounder? Because for whatever reason, he has done all these things. He has produced this super high level at Oklahoma. He worked out really, really well, and beat people who were supposed to be better than him, faster, whatever than him, and yet there's still this feeling of he's okay.
Yeah. From basically the only thing that I could really tell is that some people don't really like that he's only 182 pounds or 183 pounds.
It's heavier than Tyler Scott.
It's very
people
true.
Love Tyler Scott.
Definitely. And another big knot is that he really doesn't have a developed route tree right now. Oklahoma didn't really ask him to do a lot of the things that he would do, especially with the Browns and a Stefanski-led offense. But he's done it before. It's not like he's never done it. The routes that he should be running, he doesn't run enough because they don't like to utilize him in that way.
Yeah, look, the Big 12 scary element of that is absolutely there, because there are a lot of guys. There's so much space. The Big 12 does not have talent that other conferences do in a lot of ways. So it gives you a lot of freedom where you can just outrun guys. The Browns obviously ran into this with Corey Coleman, but you've seen this with other guys that were drafted in that range or from that conference that just never really developed beyond just being able to run around. So I get it, but I'm with you. I still, especially if he's a third round guy, I don't care at that point. I'm going to go ahead and take the guy who checks every box possible. For me, I love Tank Dell, if the Browns build a dome. I don't love Nathan Dell in that Saints game. I feel like he blows away. But his 10-yard split, his crossover move, all that stuff is just absolutely disgusting in terms of his ability to create separation. It would certainly give them another dynamic along with Elijah Moore that they could use. But the guy that I keep coming back to, and I've loved this guy the entire process, and all these people are jumping on board now, is Jonathan Mingo. I liked him when I didn't think he was a deep threat, and I thought he was just an F/slot receiver. To me, he does everything you want for a player to do. He blocks. He'll pull as a wing. I think you can do a lot of fun things with him. And the thing, the reason I connect him to the Browns is they seem to be collecting, and this, I approve of this, Lane Kiffin's star weapons in his offenses. They got Harrison Bryant from when Lane Kiffin was at Florida Atlantic. They just got Elijah Moore. Mingo would be in that same thing, because in Lane Kiffin's offense, he shows you every possible thing a player could do in doing everything. So Mingo has done all of it. He's played as an outside receiver. He's played as a wing. He's played in the slot. He's blocked. He's caught all different kinds of routes. And then he's got this ability to be a deep threat. And he's really good going over the middle. He's fearless. He's got long arms, big body. And the Browns love size. Everybody's focused on all these wayfish speed guys. And don't get me wrong, the Browns want more speed. But Amari Cooper, DPJ, and David Bell are all over 210 pounds. Mingo would be bigger than all of them. He might be sort of that perfect complement of giving the Browns a really big receiving group that can also spread an opponent out and just sort of physically dominate them. I have questions with Mingo as far as his ability to do certain routes at this point. I don't think he does things like hitches and comebacks very well, that super drastic change of direction. But like I said, you need an in-cutting route, or you want him to just go deep. I think he's a guy that can put stress on a safety who's not realizing, because Mingo has deceptive speed. I think he can put pressure on a safety real easily and put them in conflict. So I like what he can do with all these really small, speedy guys. One guy I would keep an eye on as sort of a sleeper, and I'm going to keep mentioning these sleepers because I have my article coming out on sleepers. I like Xavier Gibson from Stephen F. Austin. He's 5'9"-ish, 190 pounds. So he's thicker than a lot of these other guys. And he produced just an enormous amount for that level. And he also returned 4 punts for touchdowns over his career. So he's a guy that, and he's done, did almost exclusively from the slot. The other guy I like for the Browns is possibly a late round flyer, is Puka Nacua from BYU. And that's only entirely based off, one, Nacua is good at getting open and catching the ball. And two, he does a lot of those jet things that the Browns like to do. They want to have a jet player. Nacua did a lot of that stuff while he was at BYU. His testing numbers are crappy because he worked out hurt. But he's I think a better player than that would suggest. Now, the one group that is loaded, and this is another one where it comes down to style, really, tight end. So obviously David Njoku is your Y, unquestionably, especially if he's really putting on that kind of weight, even if he sheds some of it. If he plays at 260, high 250s, he's your Y, and he's obviously a huge threat in the middle there. But they bring in an F. They've got Harrison Bryant, who's more of an F, not on the line, not built to be an inline guy, is more of an off-ball guy. By the way, I think Jonathan Mingo could do a little bit of that, even though he's a wide receiver, sort of get a quick piece of somebody and then drop out and get a pass. But do the Browns want to get another? I think it behooves any team in this draft to get a tight end somewhere. But do the Browns want to get another big inline guy, or do they want more of these space guys that are big size matchups that can line up out in the slot, that can crack and do some of those other things in terms of blocking and put pressure on that? What do you think, Matt?
That's also something I'm battling with as well, because like if for some reason Njoku went down, obviously I believe Akins would be that guy, but I'm not even sure that would replace him as the true Y there. Like there's the type of guys like Brenton Strange, Braden Willis, even Zach Kuntz is somehow a monster, and he's huge. That could I honestly think could play on the line because he's a great blocker as well, and he consistently lined up outside in the slot for ODU. Um, I believe they had. I wasn't sure if he came in for a 30 visit or they met him at the combine, but Luke Schoonmaker from Michigan,
Yeah,
they met with.
the old man. Yeah.
Yes, yeah, and he's he's a pretty well-rounded tight end. I wasn't sure where he's actually projected to go because I've seen as high as the beginning of the third all the way back to the late fifth. Tucker, I'm not sure if they brought in Tucker Kraft. Do you guys know if they met with Tucker Kraft?
I don't know if they did, but I would.
Yeah,
I like Tucker Kraft.
Yeah, he's really, really, really good. I've been watching more and more of him as of late, but yeah, he can do everything as well. I feel like this tight end class is pretty good even after the big initial probably 5 guys. There's from like tight end 6 to 10 is completely interchangeable to me almost. It kind of depends on the physical size that you like.
Yeah, you mentioned I'm not a big Schoonmaker guy, but he's 25 and a half already. That's not my thing, but if he doesn't go get drafted, fine. That type of guy screams Patriots to me because they like to do that kind of dumb shit. And there's one guy that I have as a sleeper guy who I could totally see the Patriots taking in the first round. But the guy you mentioned that I really, really like is Brenton Strange. And that used to be like everyone would draft these simulators would take Brenton Strange in round 7.
Mm-hmm.
I would, if the Browns take Brenton Strange at 74, I'll be perfectly happy with that. I love his game. I think he's Jordan Akins with a little more potential. He just does a lot of things you really like. Like he is really good at catching contested passes. He can block. He's not afraid to lead if you need a fullback. And he's really good with the ball in his hands. He can run dudes over. He can make a guy miss occasionally. Because it's super unlikely that Sam Laporta is going to fall that far. Maybe if he does, him or Tucker Kraft, the Browns will pounce. But if not, like Brent Strange is one of those guys I'd be thrilled to have. After that, though, it gets pretty cloudy for me. I'm not sure if there's anybody else I sort of like love in this class. I think it falls off harder than maybe some people would think, but who knows? Noah, what do you think?
Yeah, I think we pretty much nailed a lot of those guys that they could hypothetically take. I think it's an interesting thought as well. They bring in Akins, so you have those 3 guys. So are they going to keep a 4th tight end if they draft one? Or are they going to I don't really understand how that would work out either. I think that would be an interesting thought because I know people threw around the idea of Harrison Bryant's on his way out after bringing in Akins.
He is.
So
it's not because of Akins. It's because of $2.7 million on his salary. His performance escalators because he played well as a rookie and did stuff. It's a lot like what happened with Mac Wilson. You're on the field so much early out of necessity, and Harrison Bryant did some good things that the Browns really don't have necessarily a spot where they're putting tight end 3 in for $2.7 million. But the thing is, there are a lot of teams that would love to get Harrison Bryant and can easily afford that and get a really easy flyer and can go, hey, we'll give you most likely a player for player type deal, just like they did with Mac Wilson. But I don't think Harrison Bryant's going to be on the opening day roster, so I think what you're really ending, and they're not going to, I mean, I guess theoretically they could do it in the draft, but I think more likely they get a guy either in or after the draft, make sure that he's not going to fall on his face, and then they can go, okay, we feel good and we can move on from Harrison Bryant. So that's where I think you're not really talking about tight end 4, which doesn't mean they couldn't keep 4 tight ends. It's just, I think that's the calculus that's built in. I think, in fact, Harrison Bryant's cap number might be higher than Akins right now.
I think it is actually. Yeah.
There's some guys I know people like that I'm not as high on. Payne Durham is okay. If you look at his 10 and not his 40 time, you're probably going to be happier with him. He is quick off the line, or reasonably quick off the line. He's just slow after that, as a sort of that He's a true second Y type guy. My sleeper for that group is Joel Wilson from Central Michigan. I think he is a guy where, because of the talent of this draft class, he might, if this was a different class, I think he'd get drafted. His bench press numbers suck. I think he had 11 reps, but he was super productive. He was the second leading receiver on Central Michigan this year, both receptions and yards, led the team in touchdowns. Missed the last 3 games with injury, which has hurt his ability to participate in pro day. He couldn't do his 40 and stuff like that. But those are the type of guy. Again, he's an F type tight end. He's not really built to put his hand on the ground, but those are the type of things I think you can potentially find if the Browns don't draft somebody. And I think that's the other question we're gonna get answered in this is, look, the Browns want to spread things out, but Kevin Stefanski likes tight ends. I think there is a balance for both of those things to come together and make it work. But let's see how that works, because to the example of what happens to David Njoku if he goes down, part of me thinks they just go, okay, we're just to put slot tight ends and flexed and bastard split and type stuff like that, and just not pretend that we have. It doesn't mean they couldn't do some of those things, or at that point, if they really want to stack it up, put the extra lineman in and do it that way. That's where I'm curious to see how they evolve going with this. All right, offensive line. I'm not. This class was tough watch. There are some gems offensive line wise, but everybody has a major flaw that you're dealing with. Even including, I think, the top few guys. I think you are picking your poison on what you feel is you're able to work on and ultimately be comfortable with. But the situation is this: Jedrick Wills is going to be back this year, and he's going to be back next year. So the Browns have a 2-year runway to sort of figure out what they want to do at tackle. In the event that they don't ultimately just stick with Jedrick Wills, but either way, it stands to reason they're going to find somebody else to put in that pipeline just in case to continue to develop. They've got obviously Bill Callahan and Scott Peters, who are really good. And then the other part is Wyatt Teller, who's probably in his last year with the Browns. Wyatt Teller is a very talented player who may not be a great fit for the direction the Browns are going. Doesn't mean he can't be effective in it, but he's more of a old school gap scheme guard, block down and make, drive people off the ball, as opposed to being more of a zone guy. And obviously when the Browns have been running outside zone, but they've run a lot of gap stuff and will continue to run a lot of gap stuff. But when they swapped to Watson, they started doing a lot of inside zone stuff, which is something they hadn't done. And it was awkward. It seemed like that more than anybody, and maybe he was hurt with the calf and some of that played into it. Wyatt Teller had a really difficult time adjusting to moving targets on inside zone concepts. And I'm curious, and look, they've got, I think I figured this out. It was like $64 million in cap dedicated to just the 5 starters in 2024. They're not going to be able to sustain that. That's like 1/4 of your team is the 5 guys up front. Mm-hmm. So he stands out as the odd man out. They can also, so they're going to probably want to get another guard. Wes Martin is not that dude. No. They do have some guys that could theoretically be decent, but I think this is another spot where they could get a nice young player that could help them. Frankly, I think it was easier for me to find guards that I liked, or projections to guards that I like in this class, as opposed to tackles. But I'm curious what you think.
Yeah, I agree as far as easier scouting positions are. It was definitely like guard, the interior guard, center, interior lineman of this class. A lot of the tackles had something wrong. That a lot of the time it's coachable, but I feel like this class are less NFL ready compared to most years.
NFL ready, and I would argue weak. They struggle a lot of these guys struggle at the point of attack.
Definitely, yeah. part of me wants to think that they may actually not take an interior guy this year, and just because they do have Forbes and Deaton, who they apparently like.
I'm still in on Prospect X. It's his time.
Definitely.
The summer of Prospect X.
And then a lot of the guards in round 4, 5, and 6, I think, are actually pretty good. Could actually like see the field if they had to this year. So it would probably behoove them to take a guy in the middle rounds this year to develop them, because like you said, they should get rid of Teller next year, whether it's I guess it has to be a trade no matter what, because if
he has to look, we are spoiled at this point where we can look at a guy like Wyatt Teller, because there are teams who would give up their firstborn for Wyatt Teller.
Yeah.
But that's just where the Browns have been. Obviously, they didn't play very well in the latter stretch of last year as a group, but he's not far removed from being like in the all pro consideration. So if they can't get this is a front office, that once got a 4th round pick for a punter. They better be able to get something pretty good out of Wyatt Teller. So, and I think that's part of the point, is like, now it becomes a way for, not only are you helping your cap burden, which is going to be a thing, the Browns are not in bad shape cap wise. They just have to, they just can't pretend that they can't have to, there's a schedule they have to keep to sort of maintain costs if they want to keep adding players. That's just where the schedule is going to sort of lead them. So in that point, let's say they move Wyatt Teller, and next year, and let's say they get like a day 2 pick or a round 3 and something else. Obviously they want more draft assets. Like, I think there's an easy fit for that, where Wyatt Teller's contract becomes very reasonable for the team that gets him, especially as we see Lidstrom's contract this year, which is, astronomical. Now Wyatt Teller becomes a bargain, potentially even for a team like Atlanta, the style of play they want to do. So, but with that in mind, which guys do you like for guard?
Right now, I really, really, really like Chandler Zavala, but I think he's a little bit older.
He is,
which makes me so sad. And I didn't realize this, but apparently there's something new that may have come out. I'm trying to confirm it, that he may not be as healthy in terms of his back injury. I'm not 100% sure of what he actually did to it, but they're saying teams are starting to become a little bit weary because it started to leak out that he's actually hasn't been working out, and that his back injury is actually affecting him more than they thought it would, which kind of stinks. But moving on from that to a guy that they most likely could take is, I love Braden Daniels as well from Utah.
Agreed.
He can play both tackle spots and both guard spots. I feel like that's the type of guy that they would probably go after, because they love versatility on the offensive line, especially with Bill Callahan and the way that he develops guys. He could take a guy who, this would be a perfect example, would be maybe a 4th or 5th round pick and develop them into another Pro Bowl guard or something possibly. And I think Braden Daniels is a guy that should be available when they're up on the clock and maybe pick 126 or 140 or something like that.
Okay, so here's a tip. If you really want to feel good about Braden Daniels, watch Tyler Steen first and then go watch Braden Daniels, because Steen's
also amazing.
Tyler Steen is so good at pass protection. It is effortless for him. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, as a run blocker, it's also effortless because he doesn't put any effort into it. He stops playing. It's infuriating because he drives me insane. His first step as a run blocker is phenomenal. He's always in the right spot. Mm-hmm. And then he just pulls up and you're just like, what is wrong with you? And this is a team that a fan base that is like, hates Jedrick Wills for that sort of looking lackadaisical. They will kill Tyler Steen because he does all these things, even though, like I said, his pass pro is unbelievable for him. He's
almost
so
flawless. Yeah.
Yes. He does everything so well. And then you turn around, you watch Braden Daniels, who is not polished. He does not do well in terms of locking on to blocks. Like, he has a problem where guys bounce off of his hands a lot and will stay alive in place. But Braden Daniels gives you everything he has on every single snap, and you just appreciate how hard he works as an offensive lineman. And he's got a great athletic, profile. He's just a dude you want to have on your team. The way his football character, as you can see it on tape, just stands out in a way you're just like, I want this guy on my football team. So I'm with you. Like he's a guy you fall in love with his tape, and I think he's a really, really good fit for zone guard. Needs to get a little more powerful, but biggest thing for him is he's got to get better with his hands and being able to secure and finish blocks. But yeah, he's the perfect type of project. The worry I have is that somebody's going to try to take him earlier than the Browns would, try to make him a tackle, and then he's not going to do as well there. But we'll see. Noah, who do you like?
Yeah, a guy that I've heard a lot of, whose stock has been rising the past couple of weeks, Nick Saldiveri from Old Dominion. He's an outside tackle guy, but I do know the Browns had a formal with him at the combine.
They did,
so there was a little bit of interest,
a visit.
at least.
I believe he's also top 30.
Yeah, so that could be a guy that they look at. But again, like we mentioned, even like on that roster, there's so many guys that they have that people forget about. Like you guys mentioned Deaton and Forbes. They also have Dunn. They just resigned.
Yes.
James Hudson on the outside. They still have Nick Harris at center. So is he able to play guard at all? I don't really know if he would be able to bump out and play guard at all. But like you guys mentioned, there's a lot of guards in the draft that could be developed by Bill Callahan. They also do have a lot of guys as well on the roster, like we just mentioned. And then a guy like Saldiveri from Old Dominion. I know a lot of teams are pretty high on him, though, so he might go a little bit earlier than Browns would take him as well.
Yeah, Saldiveri, his tape as an offensive tackle, he plays so tall. And then he goes to the Senior Bowl and he plays like he's 6'2" at guard. It drives me insane.
I don't get it. What happened there?
But he's good. Now he did. You watch him at the Senior Bowl. He does give up ground. It's not like he's plug and play dominant, and he's a big guy. I do think a lot of that is coachable, and he's just got to continue getting stronger. But he's got a lot to work with in terms of his tools. I don't see any way he's going to last. But the guy I think that might be the Browns' dream, if somehow he were to fall a little bit, would be Matthew Bergeron from Syracuse. He's Mr. Solid. He's not spectacular basically in any way, but he just does enough well that you can easily see him being sort of a starter for a good long time on your football team. The guy that they've had in, and a lot, the Browns, I believe, went to the pro day. They've had him in for a 30 visit, is Jake Witt from Northern Michigan. He's 6'7". He is 302 pounds, which is not a good combination. He's very narrow build, and he tested like a freak. He tested even better than Blake Freeland did out of BYU, and Blake Freeland was like the best tester at the combine. And I would put a little more stock in the combine, given what it requires. Blake Freeland is also, over a year younger than Jake Witt. Jake Witt is a basketball player turned football player was a tight end, is now making the transition to tackle. He has no idea what he's doing. None. But that's one of those things where you look at him and go, can we make him? And the Browns have done this in the past with a guy I really liked, out of South Carolina State, Alex Taylor, who was a hooper, who went to the Senior Bowl, and was like, not good, but he just competed. Like, he really worked his feet for a guy who was a basketball player. You thought, he'd be passive. He tried to get in there as much as possible. I really liked him. He's still floating around the NFL. With a guy like Jake Witt, you're basically determining how coachable is he, how bad does he want it. I'm not a big fan, but I get it. You can't teach 6'7" with that kind of movement skill. But you are basically drafting a power forward and trying to teach him football, which is fine. It can work for you, but that's where I get a little worried. The guy I got as a sleeper for guard is Matt Traherne from UAB. He blocked for their stud back. Last summer, he power cleaned like 350 or something like that. He's a big, strong guy. Tested reasonably well, but he's, again, with how the Browns sort of look at guys, he got to play Georgia last year. He got to play LSU this year. That is also an argument for how they might draft the running back, whose name escapes me at this moment, who's really popular with Browns people simulating his name or simulating drafts and stuff. Let me look it up as I go here. But Trahern has Dwayne McBride. So Trahern has experience at both guard spots. He's never played center, but he's working out as a center, or at least like giving teams the option. He's just a hard-nosed dude that I think could get a look. I don't think he's going to get drafted. I think he's a guy that could get a look. Should the draft, when he goes undrafted, I think he's a guy that you bring into camp. Hell, the Browns know where the campus is. They know, they've been to Birmingham, so who knows? Defense, specifically defensive line. Defensive edge is a really strong position in this class. However, the move to 42, from 42 to 74, does take a giant bite out of what you might get at that position. I was a guy who's really excited about BJ Ojolari. I like Felix Anaduke Uzama, and all the Nigerian guys. I want all the Nigerian guys on my football team. I've wanted that for years. That has not stopped. And the other guy I like, who's not Nigerian, is Tuli Tuipulotu. I've been high on him all forever. To me, I think he's a guy that has a little bit of Cameron Hayward in him in terms of just it just works. And Cameron Hayward, went into his final year at Ohio State, and everybody thought he's a top 10 pick. Oh, he's a top 10 pick. He's a top 10 pick. And then he plays out the season. He's great. And everybody gets bored of him, and he ends up going to the Steelers in the 20s or whatever it was. And now he's going to end up in the Hall of Fame. I'm not suggesting that Tuli Tuipulotu is going to go in the Hall of Fame. I just think that his style of play, it finds a way to work because he's relentless. He's quicker than people think he is in terms of he's got no hips. That's fine, but he's a power guy and he's quick relative to where his hips are going. Having said that, Andrew Berry in his press conference sort of admitted that they're going to, not really a big admission, that they're going to continue to add edge help. Whether that is through the draft, whether that is through a free agent they pick up like right before training camp, to be determined. There's certainly some good options out there in free agency. You get a guy like Melvin Ingram on this team, suddenly you're really feeling good about where you're at, even though Melvin Ingram is like my age. But still, even though the pass rushes you're going to get are flawed, there are some guys that a lot of people are excited about. I wish I was there with some of them. Like, for example, I understand in theory why Isaiah McGuire is a good player, and I understand his production. I understand his measurables, and I know Matt is high on him. What worries me about him a little bit is his get off. I wish he was a little bit quicker off the ball. Certainly that can be worked on and improved because he's a very good power rushing end who's really good in slants and that type of action. And he's good at defending cutback runs. And I think Jim Schwartz wants to use slants and stunts. So I think a guy like Isaiah McGuire could be very tantalizing at that. He's obviously got size. He's got similar build as Alex Wright. Why should I like Isaiah McGuire more than I do? Why should I not be skeptical of him? He did play in the SEC, which is also good. He played against really high level competition. And the one thing I'll throw in before I thought he gave Broderick Jones a game. Broderick Jones don't get me wrong, Broderick Jones was better. That's why Broderick Jones could end up in Pittsburgh in the first round. But I thought relative to, the competition, I thought Isaiah McGuire held his own against Broderick Jones. Even though one of my gripes with Isaiah McGuire is I don't think he finishes defeating blocks well enough at this point and doesn't sort of get enough out of his opportunities. But nevertheless, I thought he gave Broderick Jones a handful in that game.
Yeah, definitely. He played really surprisingly well against Broderick Jones. But I feel like he is just a better athlete than Alex Wright. Obviously, like you said, he's in the same mold. He's just a power rusher, a bulldozer. But like you said, and he needs to work on his technique at the next level. Obviously, a lot of the times, or a lot of the ways that he could actually basically make up for some of the lack of technique in college was the overall power and explosiveness. He just uproots offensive tackles, especially on the backside of plays. One of the reasons why he was such a good player in terms of getting in the backfield constantly is just simply because whoever tries to block him, if he was defending a zone play or anything like that, he hits all of his landmarks and he just uproots the offensive tackle. He trails them. It's very hard to describe how he kind of plays, but there's not one thing that you could say he does well, and I guess there's not one thing. I honestly don't even know what I'm trying to say.
Like I said, he's a power end.
Yeah.
I just, that's the thing is you worry about him, and there's a defensive tackle in the same. Javon Dexter scares me in the same way. I think both guys give the opponent time to set up and get in a position where they're ceding ground every play with how they come off the ball. That worries me because that to me is something that can easily be a fatal flaw at the next level. Now, again, it's not something they cannot improve, but I'd like to see better than that. Now, it's weird because like the combine number and Dane Brugler's number for his 10-yard split are completely different. For Dane Brugler's got him as a 159, which would be phenomenal if that's true. So, but just watching him on tape, I always feel like he's a hair slow, and he's also a guy who has no hips, which is fine. You don't have to play like that, but you can be a power guy, and I'm not going to complain if they can collapse the pocket with a guy like him. All right, Noah, who do you like edge wise in this class?
Yeah, edge. I know we mentioned Dexter. He can he's more of an inside guy, if I'm not mistaken.
He isn't. Yeah. He's an inside guy.
Yeah. So, as in terms of edge, we mentioned Ojulari, who probably is out of the picture at this point after trading 42. Mentioned McGuire. I like Nick Herbig. He's
here we go. There's a couple guys who like Nick Herbig on this podcast, and I'm the other guy. And it's not that I dislike him. I worry that he doesn't have a home. In fact, I think his home is linebacker. But go ahead. Don't let me steal your thunder. PFF guys love him. I know Corey Kinnan. I think he has young children, may give up one of them for Nick Herbig. Yeah. Go ahead. Sell your boy.
Well, I was going to name a couple more as well. So Andre Carter is a guy that I've heard a lot of people like coming off the edge. Another guy who had an informal with the Browns that met with them again in late March, Yaya Diaby, I think is how you pronounce his last name, from Louisville.
I think it's Diaby. Yeah. Yaya Diaby.
Okay. So yeah.
He's an old man.
So those are
love him.
Yeah, that's one of the things. And then obviously, like we at the very beginning of everything, Will McDonald we had talked about, but another guy who's older. But I think those are some of the guys that I've had my eye on. And then I don't know how to pronounce his last name, Henry from Bama, the edge guy.
From Bama.
It's like T-O. T-O.
He's a linebacker. Henry. Henry Tio or whatever. He ain't gonna play. He wouldn't play for me, but go ahead. He's a linebacker, not an edge guy.
Okay, yeah, but those guys like Herbig, Carter, Ojulari, like I said, probably not. But Yaya, any of those guys, I think would be good fits. But in general, just adding, like he said in the press conference, just adding more pieces to that room that you can get coming off the edge, because the more the merrier, really.
All right, Matt, do you want to take the mantle of Nick Herbig defender here?
You know what? I'm changing my mind.
Oh, I got you.
I'm officially changing my mind. He's going to be a Sam in the NFL.
Yeah, I think so too. And it's weird. He can only rush from one side, which is terrifying.
That makes it worse. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't get me wrong. I think that's valuable, but I hate this linebacker class so much. And what makes it worse is everybody's trying to take the few linebackers that are in it and make them play other positions. So Nick Herbig's probably a linebacker. The dude from Oregon, Noah Sewell, people want to make a defensive end. Like there's nothing. So you're basically
Still
saying
reaching.
none of the linebackers are not worth actually playing linebacker. The guy who's sort of become a forgotten entity, and I'll be very curious to see what happens to him. I think he will go earlier than he's being listed, is Isaiah Foskey. I loved him as a junior. I thought his tape was better as a junior. Senior, not as good. He beat up on some bad competition. Was it UNLV where he blocked like 7 punts and had seven and a half sacks? And that was basically his season. But he's got like 2 or 3 double-digit sack seasons. He's still very young. He's 20 or 22 and a half. He's got the body NFL teams want. He's just not very good with his hips. I will be very curious to see if the Browns suddenly, if he's falling and the Browns just are like, screw this, we're grabbing him because he's just been very good at football. And, there's certainly a value to him. It's just weird that like coming into this last year, I would have been happy to pick him with the second round pick that the Browns had he declared. And this year, you would have thought, oh, he's going to go end up in the first round. It didn't work out that way. His tape doesn't suggest it should. He did test out of his mind too. He was great. Like it's all there, and yet people just aren't with him, which is interesting. Will McDonald, I hate him, and it's not his fault.
It's skinny, he's frail. Yeah,
he's undersized, and he's 24, or he's about to be 24. That's a problem for me. I'm not even getting a guy who's ready to go out of the box in terms of his body. So you're asking me to take a projection at, a 24-year-old guy, and I have to do it early. And fortunately, most people are projecting him to go long before the Browns pick, which would make me very happy. I understand the things that people like about him, but I don't. And it's, this is one of the things that's funny to me with PFF is they don't seem to care about age, which seemingly should be very important. And they don't even consider it with him. So I'm not with him. Diaby, same age as him. Now the thing, Diaby, he got an NFL body. He ready to go. Now, even as big as he is, elite physical traits, never played the run at all, which is just strange. But listen, if he's good at it, and even if he's at that age, and again, I wouldn't take him as high as some people are projecting, but if you get to day 3 and you're just like, he's just really good at rushing the passer, and he delivers on that, then you're going to be really happy with getting a pure edge threat like him. The other guys that sort of stand out, Derek Hall, I love him, like how he plays the game. I am concerned about how he wins in the NFL. He tested out of his mind, super productive. Auburn, it felt like four players on that team, maybe 3 or 4 players were trying to make up for the other 19 on both sides of the ball, like Bigsby, Wooden, and or Wooden, I don't know which it is, and Hall seemed to be the 3 football players that were good football players trying to make Auburn work, and it wasn't happening. So I have some questions with him, but you go later on, and it's very curious to see how these guys work out. With the Nick Herbigs of the world, do the Browns want to take a swing on a guy like Lonnie Phelps, who curiously doesn't have very good hips, but is freakishly strong and fast, out of Kansas, had a ton of production this past year? Do they go later than that? Do they want a guy like Derek Parrish out of Houston, who's actually coming into the draft as a fullback, despite the fact he was one of the most productive pass rushers in the country for 4 games? He went to the East Shrine game as a fullback and was like awesome at catching passes and stuff like this. But absolute freak. Power cleans like 450 or something like that. Like squats 600, almost 700 pounds. He is maxed out. There's no more room on his body for muscle. And he's also 24. But the idea of getting a pass rusher that could theoretically play fullback and will play every special team, if he goes undrafted, the Browns should be on the horn with him. He's the guy I fear the Patriots will take in round 1. Just because they're weird like that. But like you watch him and he's dominant on the tape he's got. He's just so much faster. And because he's so good with like being able to convert power from his hips, you see him jack up tackles at the point of attack. And, you know, if you're the Browns and you're going to run wide nines, like he's the type of guy where you're like, yeah, we'll take a shot and see if he can make it work. You know, it's going to be interesting. Do the Browns want to keep going big because they have so many big guys, or do they want to get a little bit smaller? Do they want somebody more along the lines of Okoronkwo? Difficult to say at this point. I think this class, just like with running back, it gives you a lot of options for how you want to attack it. I do have questions as to if you don't do it early, is there much point in doing it at all? But we shall see. Defensive tackle is a little bit more interesting. You've got Perion Winfrey's situation, which is propped up. Now, my personal opinion is I don't think it took this to make the Browns realize that Perion Winfrey was not trustworthy. I don't think it took this to be like, I don't know if we can count on him to be a guy for us this year. Now, the question you run into is, do they really want to address that in the draft? I think you continue to do that. I think you have to keep continuing to do that. Even if you want to eventually sign a guy like Al Woods, I do believe they're going to sign a starting 3-tech at some point. I'm still waiting for Matt Ioannidis to come to the Browns. We can make that happen. Then I think the Browns are in a much better spot. But given what we know, defensive tackles, do you 3-tech versus 1-tech? Do you have guys you like at either one, Matt?
Yes, I absolutely love Zach Pickens. I apparently am the only one who thinks he is a top, 4 overall defensive tackle in this class.
I can point you to a guy who loves him, Brian Bosarge,
really?
Who's a giant South Carolina fan and draft guy. Loves him some Zach Pickens.
Pickens, he's such an excellent blend of speed and strength and explosion and strength. That's crazy. At the Senior Bowl, he completely destroyed most of the offensive line that blocked him. He completely walked back Osiris Torrance into the backfield almost every single rep. So I love him as a pass rusher. I think his best role is going to be as a 3 technique, just a really, really strong pass rushing 3 technique. Surprisingly, with how strong he is, though, he doesn't seem to read the run as well. He doesn't really keep his eyes in the backfield. It's like he has a one-on-one vendetta against the offensive lineman that he plays with the first 2 seconds of each play. It's really weird. Sometimes he'll bite on things that the normal player wouldn't bite on. But as far as creating havoc and moving the line of scrimmage, he's one of my favorite guys in terms of that. And I'm trying to think of some other guys here. Carl Brooks. I'm not sure how high people are on him anymore. It was a big fad about a month ago. Carl Brooks was the guy that the Browns were going to target. But I haven't really heard much about him. He's also a guy that I'm not 1,000% sure if he came in for a visit or they met with him at the draft.
They've met with him at the very least. I don't remember where he's from. He may have been He may have been close enough for a local. I'm not.
Oh yeah, that's what it is. They brought him in for a local.
He may have been for local pro day. I'm not 100% sure on that. It's like a 75-mile radius around Cleveland. I don't know.
Definitely. But yeah, Carl Brooks is another all-around guy that's pretty good. I like a lot of these guys that are in the maybe late 3rd to the 5th. Moro Ojimo is extremely athletic. He's a great run stopper, 3 technique.
Yeah, that
you don't like him?
But here's the question: what does Jim Schwartz really want to do? Does he want super athletic run stoppers, or does he want guys like that? Zach Pickens to me is Jim Schwartz stamp of approval on a guy like Zach Pickens. He has extremely impressive athleticism. He has a sense of how things work, being able to get in the backfield, and he checks the box that the Browns really lean into more and more, which is arm length. He's got vines. He's 34 plus. So if you're asking me, what is my read on who they would prefer? I would say Zach Pickens. And it's the same thing with Colby Wooden, who I really like as a player. he's sort of the ultimate sort of blue collar guy. He just does a lot of things well.
He's a hustle player, yeah.
And he's got a sterling reputation at Auburn as being like the ultimate, a great leader and team first guy and hard worker. There may be a part of the Browns where they're like, we just went with Winfrey. Maybe we go the total opposite and get the super program guy. But the thing with Wooden, he does a lot well, but he's also not super splashy. He's got really strong hands. I mean, that's the thing that stands out with him is he can do some destruction with his hands, but is that enough? Do they want to that's the question. So like my inclination would be they'd like a guy like Pickens more than Ojimo or Wooden. And like I could easily visualize a situation where they're like 74 or 98 and they go, boom, Zach Pickens, let's go.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's also not that they should think like this, and I don't think Andrew Berry generally does. Just a bonus. He feels readier than a lot of the guys in this class to make a contribution, which is at least something in his favor.
100%, yeah.
Noah, what do you think?
Yeah, some of these guys I have like a wide variety. So Mozzie Smith from Michigan. I mean he'll probably won't be there.
Not if what I've heard is true. If what I've heard is true, the Steelers are going to make a huge mistake and make it early.
Yeah, so we'll see. Keandre Coburn, maybe.
I love Keandre Coburn. Go ahead.
Yeah, so him, obviously Keanu Benton. He's
the pipe dream, yeah.
Yeah, so and then Broderick Martin as well from Western Kentucky is a guy that I've seen a little bit of. But yeah, and then obviously Gervon Dexter as well. So we'll see with some of those guys. Like you said, Smith probably won't be there. Maybe he'll go to Pittsburgh. But Coburn is a guy I like a lot too.
I love Keandre Coburn. And here's another, again, looking at you watch, I think the combine had is it Jervon or Gervon? I think it's Jervon, but
Gervon, yeah.
He's a guy who at the combine was listed with a 1.81 10-yard split, which would have made his his next 30 yards done in 3.07, which is ridiculous. But Dane Brugler's got him at 1.7, which is faster than Keanu Benton. But watching on tape, there's no question who gets off the ball quicker. It's Benton.
Mm-hmm.
Dexter is slow, and that's an area he has to get better at, but a ton of potential. Now, my thing is, I think he has to be a nose, at least right now. Maybe he can eventually become a 3. I just don't see a world right now where you can say you're going to fire off the ball and split the guard and the tackle or penetrate or otherwise. Like it's always waiting, finding a guy, and then using his massive upper body to sort of throw them around like he's King Kong. His upper body strength is unbelievable. And there's so much to work with him, but he's raw as hell. And he is a boomer bust type prospect. You could see him fail miserably or be a big time player in the NFL. Keanu Benton, everybody has him going high, and that's fine. I'm not suggesting he shouldn't. All I'm saying is that Travis Jones, by all accounts, should have been a late first, early second round pick, and then went like 74th or 78th or whatever it was to the Ravens in the 3rd round. People get weird with nose tackles and don't draft them seemingly where they should. And Keanu Benton profiles really similarly to BJ Hill, who was a 3rd round pick. So I'm curious to see if he lasts that long. If he does, I think the Browns would pounce. He has everything they seem to want at that position. He has versatility. He can play the 1, he can play the 3. Still has to get more strength and be better at the point of attack. But the thing that stands out with him is his balance. He does not end up on the ground. He always keeps himself alive. Keandre Coburn, I am a big fan. Look, if you have Al Woods in for a visit and they may end up signing him, it makes me think you want a big fat guy. And Keandre Coburn is a big fat guy who's also very athletic for somebody his size. And he is a pass rusher at that size. He will just deposit the center into the backfield and create pressure. And for what the Browns want to do, and they've said this with Dalvin Tomlinson. And various people like Myles Garrett has said this. If you can rock guys into the backfield and take away that escape lane, which Coburn has shown he can do, it's going to make their lives so much easier. Coburn, inconsistent, but like there are games where I see him knocked, but I still see the effort. I still see the energy and the way he plays that I'm a big fan of him, and you're getting him as a backup. You're not trying to start him. I don't need him to be a starter. If he becomes that, great. But if he gives me 15, 20 snaps a game, just high energy at 332 pounds, where he plays lower than everybody else, then I'm with it. Defensive tackle is very weird in this class, in a lot of ways, with some of these smaller guys that are in this class. The guy that is really interesting to me, and I didn't even know Texas State was in the Fun Belt, is where's he at? There is a guy whose name is Levi Bell or Levi Bell. He is a freak show athletically. And he looks it on the field. He tested 262 pounds. I don't think he played at that weight. He is 5'11 and a half, 262 testing wise. He ran a 4.58. His 10-yard split is 1.53, which would put him as fast as Nolan Smith off the ball, which is just stupid. Even if you say that's not true and you penalize him and go, that's crap. He's still very fast. 7.32 cone, 4.4 shuttle, vertical jump 37 and a half, broad jump 10'7", bench press 33. And you watch him play, he throws dudes around. He's powerful. I can't get the pursuit of the 280 pound defensive tackles that the Browns have looked for in this offseason out of my head. They were willing to go way farther than I ever would have with Draymond Jones. Like, I don't understand how Seattle's going to get the value out of that contract that they're paying him. I don't know what the Browns were thinking with him in that. But if you're going to go that route and you're saying we can get an undersized guy, we can slant him, stunt him, and do all these other things that can create with him, Levi Bell to me is a guy who might be able to do that. And he was productive for Texas State. He's just he plays with his hair on fire. There's just a lot to like with him in what I've seen. So that sounds interesting to me. Again, I think even if the Browns draft somebody, they're going to come back and get one, if not multiple free agents after the draft. But still, there's some guys in there that I think are interesting. Okay, linebacker. Ugh.
Gross.
Okay, first question I have with linebacker. Do the Browns actually have roster room for more linebackers? Do they really need to add another linebacker? I ask this because I look at the roster and they've brought back Anthony Walker Jr., they've brought back Sione Takitaki, and you can say, yes, they are still rehabbing from their injuries, but they've also got JOK. They've also got Tony Fields. They've also got Jordan Kunazic, who largely is a special teams guy, but that's fine. They've got a lot of guys. Do they need to go out and get another one in a draft, which, people can disagree with me, is after the first couple guys almost entirely made up of will linebackers, which is the thing the Browns have. Like JOK plus Tony Fields is a pretty damn good setup. I don't see a lot of guys that are going to take on the boss block and make that play that you need. And so I look at this linebacker class and I go, is it really there? And here again, Nick Herbig could be that guy. Take the Joe Schobert route, make him a Sam backer, see if he can translate. But hey, don't get me wrong, they're talented guys. Jack Campbell is a stud. Trenton Simpson seems like he fits exactly what the type of player the Browns want. Deion Henley is fine, older than I would like and lighter than I would like. But again, he's a 6-year will, and then you get into the Henry Oto O's and the Dorian Williams. I like Dorian Williams. I think he's a will. Henry Oto O, who is very athletic and never seems to be in the right place. Again, will. If you have to go down further, maybe you can talk yourself into DeMarvion Overshone from Texas. I'm not a huge fan. Here's the thing with Texas. We've already talked about two of their players. Keandre Coburn, and Moro Ojomo. And then you've got DeMarvion Overshown. You have all these players. None of them were productive. This makes no sense to me. If all this talent was this good, why did none of them produce? And I like Keandre Coburn, but like none of these guys were productive. They're all very good athletes. And Texas's defense wasn't great. I think the next guy you could talk yourself to a very specific mic is Ivan Pace Jr. from Cincinnati. He's interesting. I guess he has to be right though. And he has to be the player to the spot. And then you get into the Noah Sewells of the world, who is fine, but is he not just Sione Takitaki all over again? In which case, do you really want to draft that again, or are you happy with the guy you have? So I ask all these questions. Noah, do you like anybody from this linebacker class? Am I insane that they really don't necessarily have roster space for these guys?
No, I agree with you 100%. The two guys that I've had my eye on the whole time, Jack Campbell, obviously, super, super talented, and then Trenton Simpson as well. But other than that, and outside of a couple of other guys you mentioned, it's like, are those guys really that much better to use a draft pick on that you're then going to probably cut one of those guys that are on the roster now? They have so many depth guys there. They just really need one or two of them to step up. JOK obviously is going to have that starting role. Anthony Walker as well.
Right.
So then really you're just looking for one other guy who's going to be able to start probably in that Jim Schwartz defense. So do you really need to use a draft pick? Because after those top couple of guys, it does get really cloudy. And at that point, it's almost like a lost cause.
Like, who of these guys would you? And I forgot to mention Matt. What's his face? The special teams guy who was arrested for armor piercing bullets before he got to the Browns.
Adams,
yeah. That's interesting. But anyway, yeah, he's another guy.
That's good.
But here's my question. Is there anyone that you want to trade a draft pick for that you'd rather have, other than presuming he's 100% healthy, more than just getting Reggie Racklin back and seeing if he can hack it?
I don't think so.
Definitely not. To me, this is just a narrative of the fans kind of pushing for a linebacker rather than the team actually needing them. To me, if you look at the roster, I believe there's already 6 guys that are most likely locks on the team, and I'm not sure if they're going to keep 6 or 7 linebackers. They don't need a guy to come in for special teams. They have at least 2 guys specifically signed for special teams. So like I said before, I think it's just the fans really pushing it. In reality, I'm sure the team doesn't really feel they need to waste a pick on a linebacker.
Yeah, I think the criticism of linebacker play is fair. The problem is you're addressing it from the wrong angle. The best thing the Browns can do for their linebacker play is have a professional defensive line in front of them. So that JOK is not taking on a 330-pound guard he's never going to beat. He's never going to win that battle. Anthony Walker is not going to win that battle either. So, and I cannot stand the question of, do we need bigger linebackers? Like Levon Kirkland is going to come out of retirement, or they can get that dude from the Arizona Cardinals who doesn't play, who's 270, so he's big enough to play defense for what fans think they want. Now, having said that, there are 2 linebackers I actually like, and one of them I don't want to play linebacker. First, I am a big fan of Trevor Nowaski from Saginaw Valley State. If you watch his tape, he's a freak show. Absolute freak show. Man amongst boys, including he played D2, Saginaw Valley State, including against the national champion Ferris State Bulldogs. He is huge. He's 237 pounds. He's 6'2" and change. Elite athleticism. The Browns were allegedly at his pro day. He is able to destroy blocks. They line him up all over the place. He had 4 picks because he's good in short zone. And I don't have any delusions that he would come and start. But I do think if you can get him, whether it's a late round pick or after the draft, because he played at such a small school, that I think you can bring him along in that Sione Takitaki route. Put him at Sam first, and then see if he can sort of figure it out and become a Mike backer down the road. So for me, I have walked through a desert of will linebackers and found somebody I believe can take on a block and make a tackle, and he does it constantly for Saginaw Valley State. The other guy I like, and I don't want him to play linebackers, Charlie Thomas from Georgia Tech. He
So
is
small.
right. He's 6'2" and 5'8" and 216 pounds. But he was like a 5-star recruit, turned down a bunch of other places to go to Georgia Tech. And he just finds a way to the football, and he's got coverage skills, and he does all these other things. He's also a former high school safety. Now, to me, I would take all of these things and I would try to make him into a slot. The Browns need slot guys anyway. He could, if you can get him after the draft or whatever, he can come in and compete with Anthony Bell. You can actually find him at Georgia Tech punching the ball out like the Anthony Bell did in the preseason. He's younger. There's just a lot there. I think he's already geared towards making plays in the backfield. I think he had 20.5 tackles for loss in the past 2 seasons. But he creates turnovers. He does a whole lot of things, and he's got a ton of experience on special teams. But here again, I'm taking a linebacker from this crappy linebacker class and making him something else. That is not good. So yeah, linebacker sucks to me. Now, granted, we'll see how many stars come out of this, and I can eat it later. The position, the exact opposite. All right, let's stay bad. Let's stay bad. Safety is also bad. Now, certain people on this podcast have tried to talk themselves and me into some of the worst athletes this draft has to offer as safety. That person is Matt Wilson. Defend your many boys that you have that are terrible athletes.
Makes me not want to talk now. There's really 4 guys I like that's probably draftable to me. Like specifically for what the Browns are looking for before like round 4, and that is Jordan Battle, Jamie Robinson, J.L. Skinner, and Quan Martin. I'm kind of backing off J.L. Skinner a little bit.
Well, look, I love him healthy.
Yeah,
it's just that's the thing. Like,
yeah,
and the look, if the Browns have yet to do that, because I've also had people make the argument that they should take Voorhees somewhere, and see if his knee recovers correctly. The history with taking guys like that is terrifying, and it's weird. It makes no sense to me. It seems like, oh, his knee will get repaired and he'll be good and he'll be basically like a rookie. It just doesn't work out like that. I remember years ago when Trent Baalke was with the 49ers and they had a ton of extra picks and they took like all these guys who had season-ending injuries, and none of them worked out. And I don't know of a guy the Browns have drafted since Ikpre Olumu out of Oregon, who was at that point projected to be a first-round corner, basically stepped on a landmine preparing for the national championship game or whatever it was, I think against Ohio State, suffered a bunch of injuries to his knee. He never played it down for the Browns. They took him in round 7, which is fine. And everybody's really excited. They're going, oh, man, they got this first-round corner. He's going to be great because they got essentially a flyer for him. It's weird how that works. Even last year, I thought the Browns would be really interested in a tight end out of Virginia Tech who ended up on the Detroit Lions because he was like sort of nearing the end of his recovery from a torn ACL. And it was like he was like a couple months away. And I thought, man, this one makes sense. And he ended up getting drafted by the Detroit Lions and made plays for them this past year. Like, they're excited about him. At least Andrew Berry has mentioned like injury history is a thing. They have not really taken a lot of guys who have been cut on much. So I'm curious. So like in theory, J.L. Skinner projects as a guy where you're like, I can plug him in the slot when he's healthy and we're good, because that is like a great fit for him at his size and his skill set and all the other things. Will the Browns actually go that route? I'm very dubious. I'll be curious to see where he ends up getting drafted. You see talk of him being like a day fringe, day 2, day 3 pick. We'll see. And maybe this is the class you take a guy like that because you're sitting there going, one, we're the Browns and we don't have a ton of roster space and we don't like this class much anyway. So let's take a guy we do like and hope he can figure it out. But go ahead. Battle, he's He's not a good athlete, but I think you can make a strong argument for him as at least a slot player.
Yeah, a lot to my defense. I will say that a lot of this isn't based on straight up. I think like these guys are elite talents at the position, but I value these guys as far as versatility goes. Like Jamie Robinson and Quan Martin in battle, they literally played them all over the field. Like Robinson had double-digit pressures this year when blitzing. And Jamie Robinson may be right now my favorite guy. Just he is undersized. He's a little stiff, but he's just got an attitude about him when he's in press coverage in the
He's
slot.
a prick, and you got me there. I love prick corners and prick DBs.
Oh yeah, he has an attitude that you're not going to beat him. Even at the Senior Bowl.
Yes.
It actually worries me a little bit because he gets really chippy.
I love it. Love it. Love it. Give me that guy. Give me those guys.
Yeah. I mean, that's part of the reason why I think he's a really good fit there. He could play strong safety. He could play in the slot when they shifted some of these nickel and dime packages. And I just think he might be my favorite guy, probably before round 4.
Look, he's outstanding on tape. There's no getting around it. His athleticism sucks. His agility's okay. He's fine on that. Arms are short.
Yeah.
There's just a lot of things you look at him and go, ugh. But you turn on the tape or you watch him in those practices. He's competitive as all hell. Like he doesn't get back. You give me chippy DBs who chirp and talk and do that. They're up on my board. My top corner, the year that the Browns took Denzel Ward, Jair Alexander. He was a giant prick. Hated everybody he played against. I love that. Thomas Graham, who's on the Browns, loved him coming out of Oregon. Talk shit the whole game. Give me those guys. Because here's the thing. Corner and those type of positions are like, they're spots that sort of lend themselves to being good for irrational confidence guys. Because if you're not, then you're sort of beat. So I like having guys who that like don't back down in that situation. So like from that standpoint, I'm with you on Jamie Robinson. I do worry about the measurables. But as a pure slot option and some of the other things he does, he's interesting. Like, look, the Browns, for all the stuff they do about measurables and everything else, they took David Bell. I mean, David Bell was like the anti-measurable guy. Now he just produced out of his gourd. That alone gave him some like decent chances of being like a long-term starter in the NFL and those type of things. But like nobody was picking, him on athleticism. He's barely more athletic than Jarvis Landry was. He's interesting. Just based on that, like you can convince me a lot just on being a dick at DB. So yeah, Noah, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll add a couple as well that I've seen. Christopher Smith from Georgia.
Matt didn't even try. Go ahead.
I'm out on him now because they already signed. That was before we signed Thornhill. He's more of a true center field guy, so I kind of backed off a little bit now. But
do they have a backup?
I guess not.
Just admit, you see just how bad of an athlete, and you're sitting there going, ugh.
I was also thinking from our defensive end talk, we didn't talk about Zach Harrison, which was a guy that I was curious to hear what you guys thought about from Ohio State. Matt's shaking his head, but then so maybe think about Ronnie Hickman, who's probably going to be somewhere around that 4th rounder area.
Further down. I think Ronnie Hickman's interesting. You're not wrong. Go ahead.
And then the last thing I was going to say was just maybe a flyer very late. If not, get him in on an undrafted free agent deal with Anthony Kendall that we've talked about a good amount.
He is definitely the sleeper.
The Baldwin Wallace kid, right?
Yeah, Baldwin Wallace, free safety, who could also be a factor in slot. Look, I mean, the Browns have been the Browns can hit him with a football from the facility if he's on campus. I mean, that's how. So they better be aware of him. But yeah, they've talked to him. So we'll see. And he's a guy who's not likely to get drafted. Came in way smaller than I think people were expecting, because initially it was like, oh, he's 5'10" and whatever. And then it comes in, he's like 5'9", 3/4, and he's like 170 some pounds. But he tested really, really well. He was a D3 All-American, production, crazy, all that stuff. So he's a guy I would definitely bring in as a flyer. To your question of Zach Harrison is a straight power end who doesn't seem to understand he's a power end yet. And the way I can sort of summarize Zach Harrison, and I've seen him do this on multiple occasions, will drive a tackle into the backfield, beat him, and just destroy him, and then get to the running back and then try to run around him. Having just demolished a 300-pound man, and then goes, no, I'm going to circumnavigate the 180-pound running back to get at the quarterback. That, to me, is Zach Harrison in a nutshell. If you get him with a good defensive line coach, I don't know the Browns have that. I couldn't tell you anything about Ben Bloom. I couldn't pick him out of a lineup. I couldn't tell you if he walked in here with a sign around his neck, I still wouldn't know who he is. So I don't know what he has for a track record. But if you can get Zach Harrison to just embrace the fact that he's a power end and don't pretend he has hips, because he does not, then I think he could be an okay player. He's really fast, straight line speed. He's the ultimate Dorsey pick in this class. And when I say that, because he said this on multiple occasions on tape regarding draft picks, two of which I could not stand at the time. One of them was Mac Wilson, and the other was Chad Thomas. And he said to the guys in the room, "There's a football player in there. We have to find it." That's not where I want to go with players. And those were both of the guys I mentioned were highly recruited high school guys. Zach Harrison's was a highly recruited. I think he was 4 or 5 star guy. It's terrifying how low his production is. He's supposed to be the next in the line of defensive ends at Ohio State, and like Tyreek Smith and guys like that were just more productive than he is. So he's a guy who just has not figured it out. He's 21.
Yeah.
So
I was shaking my head.
That's the thing where you sit there and you go, I think Zach Harrison's a player you can talk yourself into, but he may be a player you want to talk yourself out of. Now, who knows? A lot of that's figuring out how the kid is wired. I don't have access to that. I've never spoken to the young man. I don't know, but that is at least something to consider. Ronnie Hickman did not test. I think it was a knee or something that he didn't test either time. The fear most people have with him is that he is a slow player. So not testing did not help him from that standpoint. My issue with Ronnie Hickman is I think he's very good playing forward. I think he's miserable playing backward. He's more of a linebacker than he is a true safety. Now, can Ronnie Hickman play that slot role? I think he can, but do you worry about him getting outclassed by more athletic guys? I do. So I think if you can get Ronnie Hickman late day 3, I think you're probably pretty happy with him. I think round 4 is too rich for me, but you can make an argument. Look, his production profile is outstanding. Like he produced out. He put up a ton of production at Ohio State, so he's at least interesting. So if you just print out an analytic profile of him without the athleticism that you don't have, or if you want to use, track it, on tape or whatever, you look at his profile and you go, wow, he's really good. I have major concerns with him. Same thing with Christopher Smith. I think he understands how to play free safety at a very high level. I just don't know how much is in there because of his athletic limitations. But look, the Browns need a backup free safety. Now, personally, I would love them to sign a guy for that. Jerron Harmon stands out as a guy I would love to have in that. But if we're talking about safeties in this draft that I think could be interesting, Jason Taylor II from Oklahoma State is interesting. He has otherworldly production. Like I think he had 6 picks this past year, a ton of tackles and everything else at Oklahoma State. Decent athletic profile, has done a lot of different things for them as a mid-round guy. Chamari Connor is sort of interesting to me. I think he may get drafted higher than I would be comfortable taking him. He's out of Virginia Tech, and he's played something like 1,800 snaps of slot. So it's not like a projection as to what he can do there. The tape is there. So he's interesting from that standpoint. Multiple time team captain, some other things. Can't catch to save his life, but he's got some credibility. Javarius Owens from Houston interests me as a free safety depth guy. Not overly exciting, but has a pretty good athletic profile, has a weird knack for catching interceptions and returning them a very long way with his mouthpiece in his helmet as opposed to in his mouth. I don't know what that is, but it stands out because despite being red helmets and white jerseys, it's a powder blue mouthpiece, so you can't miss it. So he's running down the sideline with the freaking thing shaking out his head. But it's tough. It's just such a poor athletic class. Other than Sidney Brown and some of the Daniel Scott, but Daniel Scott is 24 and a half. Sidney Brown is very raw in certain respects. He's very risky in terms of tackling. There's other guys in that realm that are athletic but just scare me personally. As I said, I already mentioned the guy like Charlie Thomas, who's a linebacker. I think could make the switch to slot. I don't really have any other guys that jump out at me at safety. It's just again, poor athletes, and athleticism is important in athletics, and this class does not have it in that. But the position that does, it's to me the best position in the whole class is corner. Now, I'm curious. Does what you heard from Greg Newsome at the press conference change your perception about how the Browns should go with the corner position, or do you think it does change how the Browns go about sort of looking at corner? The Browns arguably already have 5 guys that are locked in and ready to go, between Denzel Ward, Greg Newsome, Martin Emerson Jr., AJ Green, and who am I missing? Somebody else.
Thomas Graham. Is that?
Well, he's more CB6 to me.
Oh, that's true.
But and they've got one other guy who, and they've got the Matt Ford or whatever his name is, the guy they got from Atlanta.
Oh, Mike Ford, yeah.
Mike Ford, who more of a special teams guy than anything, but certain people on this podcast really loved his 85 reps at corner.
I love it.
So to me, though, you look at this class and you go, 1, the Browns are really good at picking corners, and 2, this corner class is outstanding. So the Browns should continue to go ahead and play to the draft strengths and see what's there. But like I said, should the Browns view the corner class differently with what you heard from Greg Newsome in his press conference? And then does it? Noah, go ahead.
I don't think you should view it differently if you're the Browns. There's a ton of solid guys like you mentioned, and again, they're so good at drafting those corners. Nobody expected that Emerson draft pick to happen, and then nobody even had heard of him when he was drafted, and then all of a sudden he shows on the field and he's playing really well. But a guy I will mention, DJ Turner. I love DJ Turner. His speed is crazy. And I think that's a very Browns pick, and I think that he would fit in well. But again, it's sort of like the same with wide receivers. You can never have too many. You can never have too many receivers, never have too many corners. And that's something Andrew Berry has preached a lot too for that position is you're one injury away from having a guy that you draft that you don't anticipate playing very much to having a bigger role. But yeah, I think that whole Greg Newsome situation was interesting, and we'll see what happens.
Right. Go ahead. Matt, what do you think? Does it change anything?
I don't think that it should change anything, because something that a lot of people aren't really talking about when they are talking about the whole ordeal with Greg Newsome is that, yes, he did play in the slot last year, and he can, but he wasn't that good when he was in the slot. He's a guy that I would want to keep on the outside regardless. So I really think that they should go after somebody who can play at a consistent level in the slot. Anyways,
I think Greg Newsome got better as the season went on, got more comfortable, got a little more competitive at that position. He's not about that life that Mike Hilton is about in terms of coming downhill and making plays in the backfield or being the overhang. I mean, he mentioned it twice in the press conference. He didn't like feeling like a linebacker. Mike Hilton does that a lot. and that's just how he is. That's why he's good. But having said that, even if Greg Newsome does nothing but play nickel in obvious passing situations, you're pretty happy about what you've got out there in that setup. Nevertheless, I'm 100% with you in terms of I do think the Browns should still get somebody who can play in the slot. Now, maybe if anything, it just changes your viewpoint in terms of inside outside versatility. Like as before, or I'm sitting here going, okay, I need to find somebody who's going to be able to function in the slot. I'm a little bit more open-minded in terms of guys who can do a little bit of both. And Noah's guy, DJ Turner, is like the perfect example of a guy who can do both. DJ Turner, undersized, he's very small. He is so super confident in his movement skills that he will wait till the last moment to flip and turn his hips because he wants to come downhill and make the play on the ball. Here again, with his lightweight, can he hold up the full time in the slot? I have questions. I'm genuinely curious to see how the Browns sort of view that position. My guess is they sort of would view it as two halves to one whole, which is half of it is a corner that can do the coverage things, and half of it is a safety that can, if they put a tight end in there, or their heavy running team, or some of those things that they can do some of that stuff. Basically, you take the half. Troy Hill was one half, and Ronnie Harrison was a half. Nothing would make me happier than the Browns being able to find the MJ Stewart, who at least for one half of one season was the guy who could do it all. And then signed in Houston, and I don't even know if he plays.
I'm surprised. I was honestly surprised they didn't try or maybe they did try and re-sign him, but I'm surprised they weren't able to come to an agreement with him.
Well, my guess is they offered him, league minimum,
yeah.
And they're basically like, okay, and he took I think $2 million to seemingly not play with the Texans. But anyway, that's sort of the dream scenario. But so with that in mind, Noah mentioned DJ Turner. Matt, who do you like?
I like. I shouldn't say I like, but I've been getting warm. I've been growing a little bit to like Travius Hodges-Tomlinson from TCU. Yes, he is incredibly small, especially in the height department, but his closing speed and burst, a lot like DJ Turner. He's a guy who could literally be explosive. He is. He's got, I think it's close to a 40-inch vert as well. It's crazy how athletic he is, and he's great at processing different routes. He's so good at attacking comeback routes. Like I said, it's that all that stems from his explosiveness and his ability. But he's a guy who I'm really starting to like, just simply because he's able to teleport to where the ball is half the time. And somebody who we talked about recently, Corey Trice. I should really let you talk about him, but I love him, but sometimes it seems like he doesn't realize how big he is.
Yeah, Corey Trice. Well, the biggest hitch with him potentially of the Browns is he's coming. He's recovered and played the latter part of the season coming off an ACL tear. Corey Trice is a linebacker who plays corner in terms of he's big, 6'3", and 3/8, 206. And he's a press corner that will just take guys out the game. I think perhaps partly because he was trying to get his mobility back. When he tested, he blew people away with his agility, like just a genuine freak show. Him and Julius Brents, both those bigger corners with just stupid movement skills. But when you watch him and if he's pressing, you're done.
Yeah.
Like his effectiveness as a press corner is out of this world. And to me, you sit there and go, okay, put him in the slot and have him do that. Just take dudes out. But for as big as he is, you watch him play and whether it's the run game or just stuff going on, he won't go. He'll just stand there and wait he'll wait for plays. He is big enough and strong enough and athletic enough where he could go down and make a ton of plays in the backfield if he wants to. That's sort of the question you have to ask yourself or ask him and try to get a read on him in terms of what he's willing to do, because he could be an unbelievable player in that because he's so big and still has movement skills that will allow you to do some of those things. So he's a big question mark in that, because you can easily project you're going, he's going to be a badass guy inside and just erase people with press, and then also be a guy who's willing to play downhill. If not, he could still be a guy who erases people with press, and then you're just useless. You're just, if it's an obvious running situation, you're going to take him off the field.
Yeah. Like if I'm taking you and you're that big, you can't hesitate like that. You have to be able to trigger downhill and want to hit people.
And again, how much of that was the knee? I don't know. But that the potential is otherworldly with him, and he could be in the area the Browns really like. Now, the guys I like on this, I like Clark Phillips, mouthy prick. I love it. And he had me at, I don't play L drill. I was sold. He's so good, but he's small. He's got short arms, and he didn't test that well. Now he's super young, but his production is out of this world for Utah. He's what I'm curious about, because I see him projected to go super high, and all these teams are like, or all these people are like, well, he's the best slot corner or whatever. I'm very curious to see on draft day, is that how it plays out? And somebody's like, no, we'll happily take him in the second round and be like, no, we love him to do this thing, and we're going to move on. Or do teams sit there and go, well, he's a slot corner, we don't really want to take this until round 3 or 4, and does he sit there and fall to the Browns in that situation? I'm curious to see how that would play out. But if you're asking me who's the guy I want on my team, and it's 74th pick or whatever, if the Browns take Jacorian Bennett from Maryland, I'm thrilled. I love Jacorian Bennett. He's all the things I want. He's all the things I want. He's a prick. He plays physical. He is not afraid in the slot, even though he didn't play there primarily. He comes downhill. Jacorian Bennett is fascinating, and he has a lot of things that I think you can sort of see in his game. Jacorian Bennett was a 0-star recruit who had a low ACT score. He goes to Kansas to play JUCO. Kansas is a JUCO hotbed. There's a ton of guys that go out there. He does well there. He ends up getting recruited by Maryland. He becomes a starter there, and he's got his degree in something. It's not like communications or something. It's like a seemingly real degree. But anyway, he's the grinder. He's the guy who had to work his way up and earn it. And I think you see that in the way he plays on the field. He is not perfect. He will make some mistakes along the way, but in the same way that Braden Daniels on the offensive line does, I don't think you ever get less than Jacorian Bennett's absolute best and everything he's got. And he plays with aggression. He tackles. He does a lot of things, and he's a big time player on special teams. Maryland put both him and Deonte Banks on all of their block teams. And he was part of a group that I think Deonte Banks actually blocked it, but Bennett's the one who picked it up and ran it back against Ohio State. Has elite physical traits, all the things you want in that end. And obviously has inside outside versatility theoretically, but I actually think he may be a guy where giving him less space to operate may be better for him in a more prescribed role. I think he's a guy who will thrive as a blitzer. I've seen him do that a little bit at Maryland. He's a guy that I absolutely love. He's not as small as some of the other guys. He's almost 190 pounds, which I think can be important at that spot, even though, again, you mentioned a guy like Mike Hilton, who's like 170 some pounds. It's just, he's willing to put his body like that. I think it's valuable that Bennett has a little bit of heft with him. Guy I am interested in as a potential sleeper, Khalif Halasi, Western Kentucky. Not shocking, prick. But started his career at Oregon, played a ton of special teams for them. I don't know what happened at Oregon, but ended up at community college in Kansas for a couple of years before ending up at Western Kentucky. Not strong. That's my biggest issue with him right now. It hurt him in terms of his explosiveness and some of the other things. Didn't end up running 40, but his explosion wasn't very good in terms of his jumps, but has elite agility for a 6'1.5", 193-pound guy who I think this past year his QB rating against him was like 50 some. He's productive. He's been effective. And I'm very curious to see how this goes in terms of DB and the Browns could, even though the Browns have, 5 corner spots seemingly already locked up, it wouldn't surprise me if the Browns still have a strong sales pitch to undrafted free agents simply because AJ Green was an undrafted free agent, even though they signed him to basically like the equivalent of a 6th-round pick deal. And then DeAnthony Bell, not a corner, obviously, but just a DB, made the team last year as an undrafted free agent, that it maybe help their sales pitch that some of these guys look at them and go, maybe I can make the team. I think obviously that would work well for Anthony Kendall as well. That potentially you have a nice reason to want to go to the Browns because they do, you can see guys on the team that worked hard and earned it as opposed to just sort of being tackling dummies for 8 weeks or whatever. I'm curious, is there one prospect each of you would want to, and it could be more than one, but at least one prospect you would want to stand up in the draft room for as a scout and pound the table for this man to be on your football team?
Yeah, I think out of everyone, it would probably be Keanu Benton. I think he fills a need and also is super, super talented. So I think that he would be probably my number one guy as to if I was in that draft room telling them who I would draft.
You got to work on a better speech for it though. Go ahead, Matt.
Honestly, it might be Braden Daniels from Utah, that offensive lineman, the guard tackle. I just feel like he's a guy that fits exactly what Cleveland's going to do, especially now that they're going to, quote unquote, spread the offense out a lot more. In order to play in that kind of scheme, you need somebody extremely athletic, especially with all the different forms of, split zone, the different types of zone schemes that they run. And I think Braden Daniels could do pretty much anything that Cleveland's going to ask. And if, they do move on from Wyatt Teller, he's a guy that, at least in this year's draft, I think you could legitimately see possibly developing into a starter down the line.
How high would you be comfortable taking with Braden Daniels? Like if they turn the card in 74 and they go Braden Daniels and you...
Oh, no. As much as I love him, I still think he should be in that round 4 range. Like pick 111 or 126. Closer to 126. I want to say higher, but I feel like the needs that are before them, the first 3 guys that they pick before him, are going to benefit the team more than an offensive lineman. I feel like that's the only thing that would stop me.
Well, I mean, Andrew Berry, you don't care about your needs. He's picking talent.
That's true. I want to say round 3, but I'm going to stick with round 4.
Okay. For me, Jacorian Bennett's my dude. I would 74 if they want to take him there. I'm in. He's that guy for me. Listen, the way he plays football is the way I want my team to play football. And Braden Daniels, I would include in that. They give you everything they got, and they're talented. And both those guys have excellent athletic traits and all that. I think there's definitely a path for Jacorian Bennett to be a very good football player. Like I said, I think he could operate in the slot, but he's certainly a guy who could play on the outside if need be. Yeah, I love his game in that regard. As I said, Brenton Strange is sort of in that realm for me too. As I said, I would not be upset if they took him at 74. And that's the weird part of this draft for me is I guess in some ways freedom is because the Browns don't have 1st and 2nd round picks, that I've been sort of thinking about this in terms of normally I would say the 4th round, get your guys. Don't worry so much about, I can quibble with certain things. Like I mentioned, Ronnie Hickman, I wouldn't take in the 4th round. I would take him later than that. But I think once you get to day 3, maybe you can be a little picky in round 4. But after that, I think even including that in some ways, you just get your dudes because it becomes the Wild West and you have no idea where guys are going to go. And you just got to get your guys. But it's weird because the Browns, one of the 3rd round picks is barely before the end of the day. And then the other pick is 74. So because of this, it's almost like you have this long extended thing of just get your dudes. So if you feel good about them, do you hesitate at all to get them? Do you really worry about it? And obviously they're going to play their board and all those things, but like, that's what I'm sort of curious about, to see where this ends up. If the Browns take some weird players relative to maybe expectations, and obviously, because like we opened with, I think the talent is scrunched up enough that you can, it's not difficult to make, guys make an argument that cornerback 17 is pretty close to cornerback 10 or whatever. And maybe there's a better example of positions for that. I think once you get past about linebacker 4, linebacker 5 to linebacker 55 is about the same damn thing. But anyway, and the other part, the other possibility is, much like happened last year, that 74th pick may be somebody that falls to them. Even though a lot of people didn't have Martin Emerson ranked super, super high, the NFL did, and he was perceived to fall. JOK was a fall. Is somebody going to, somebody's going to fall. Is it going to be somebody that the Browns want? And are they going to pounce on it? That'll be interesting to see with that. Any final thoughts on the draft, or either things you think are going to happen, things you expect, you hope to happen, or anything along those lines that we haven't already discussed? Noah, go ahead.
No, I think we pretty much said most of it. I think that there's two things really you can expect. One is that they're never going to draft a guy based on need. They're always going to get the best available player, no matter where they're picking. And two, I'd expect them at some point to, they're not keeping all 8 of those. They don't have room for that, all 8 of those guys. So I fully expect them to at least make 1 or 2 trades to acquire draft capital for 2024, because they're pretty depleted there within the first 4 rounds. I think it's like 2 picks in the first 4 rounds for next year. So 100% expecting them to make a move, trade a pick or 2 out of this year and get some more back next year.
Fair enough. I could see a scenario where they use 8 picks, but I still think the odds are way higher that they're going to try to get more assets for next year. It just makes sense. Maybe they love this class more than we do. Maybe they're going, no, we want to get guys here. But I think the overwhelming likelihood is it's how you laid it out. Matt, anything else?
Basically, just the fact that I think running back may be selected higher than people think, and maybe linebackers, if they even do select one, is going to be a lot lower than people think.
I love you go through those simulators. It's very easy to tuck yourself into one of those running backs very, very early.
Yeah.
So I'm with you. I love it. And I think if you do that, and this is the part of that I hate about the running back conversation, all these people are like, oh, well, he's not even going to play this year. If he's good, he's going to play right now, and he's going to make Nick Chubb better and potentially, give them more offense. Like this whole offseason has been, the Browns need to get Deshaun Watson more weapons. The Browns need to get Deshaun Watson more weapons. Deshaun Watson played for the Houston Texans. They had no running backs the entire time he was there. His best running back was Carlos Hyde one year. Like the guy the Browns said, no, thank you. And Carlos Hyde changed the diet and had one pretty good year. But they don't want to be in a situation where they can't run the ball at all, and Deshaun Watson's basically your leading rusher in addition to your passer. And Kevin Stefanski's really good at calling and designing running offenses. He's not going to just be like, "Nah, we're good. We're just going to throw it 70 times all over the park." One thing I forgot real quick. Do either of you think the Browns draft a quarterback?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I can see both sides. I could see them taking a flyer late just to give Kellen Mond some competition, because they'll probably end up keeping. Obviously they'll be protecting one of those guys on a practice squad. I know people before the Dobbs signing were kind of like Mond could be that backup, but the Browns wanted someone that they know for a fact could come in and win them a game if Watson goes down, which is part of the reason they brought Dobbs back. So I could see them taking one of those guys late and then having him compete with Mond through camp, and then whichever one wins that will be protected on that practice squad.
Okay.
I'm a little torn as well, but I hated when they even claimed Kellen Mond. I don't know why they used that waiver spot for Kellen Mond.
No. I love that move.
God,
love it.
You loved it?
Yes. Don't get me wrong. I did not like that it cost him a roster spot. but you picked a quarterback who's physically identical to Deshaun Watson. And if he can't play, who cares? You gave up nothing to get a potentially talented long-term backup quarterback.
I guess it's a good point. Yeah, but
if all else fails and you cut him and nobody else claims him, you can put on your practice squad. If not, then whatever. So here's my thing. I don't think the Browns are going to draft a quarterback. Unless the NFL changes the rules on how quarterbacks are rostered. There's no point in carrying 3. To me, I would rather keep a 10th defensive lineman, or, well, I won't say 7th wide receiver. That's just stupid. but I'd rather have a position player. I'd rather have a special teams guy. I'd rather have something and put another guy on, get another guy in the practice squad. The Browns could sort of afford to do that last year because so much of last year was baked into, I don't want to say taking a year off, but they pulled their punches relative to absorbing the Deshaun Watson suspension, and everything else. So they could say, here, we're going to do this. They can't do that this year. And I think they have done a lot of homework on these quarterbacks, one, in case they go undrafted, and I don't think any of them will. But if they don't, the Browns are trying to figure out if and when other teams give up on them or they fail or whatever, and then they grab them. To me, Dorian Thompson-Robinson's going to go day 2, maybe. I don't think he's going to get out the second day. So the Browns getting to know him and everything's great, but it's not because they think they're going to draft him. It's because they want to figure out if he's worth pursuing later. And Hainer and the dude from Houston are fine, but I don't think they're going to draft a quarterback. I don't think it makes sense. I think they are always trying to identify quarterbacks in every draft that they like, because they may have a possibility of working with them in the future. So that's where I'm at. Anyway, that wraps us up for this. This was fun. It will be interesting to see how the Browns actually do this thing, since we are now less than a week away, even though the Browns don't start until Friday. But this should be interesting. Anyway, thank you, Matt Wilson, for being on here. Thank you, Noah Weiskopf. Like I said, this was fun. Hopefully people enjoyed this. And we should be back next week with a more normal thing, but who knows? We'll see if we do something like this in terms of talking about what they actually did.